Hi, Dylan. Say hi.
Hello.
So, today, do you want to talk about conformity or obedience? I know you said you don't know much about either, but which one would you?
Obedience.
Obedience? Okay, so overall, do you know the general definition of obedience?
Sure.
So, it's basically not just following whatever rules or guidelines are set, or the norms, the social norms that are set. But someone is telling you to, and they're typically in a position of power, whether social power or actual power, and there are consequences for not following through. So, do you think obedience is a good thing or a bad thing?
A good thing.
Why?
Because if everyone broke rules, then we'd have really no need for rules.
But what about in cases like Hitler, where he flexed his social power to make people do bad things under threats of bodily harm, familial harm? What he employed there was obedience onto the Nazis, right?
Bad luck.
Bad luck.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
It's like, no matter what there is, there's probably one bad or two bad things for it. But it's like just because one occurrence of it is bad doesn't mean every occurrence of it's bad.
Well, there's actually not just one occurrence. There's tons of occurrences of that happening. But the point is there's two different kinds of obedience. So you just have your general obedience, but you also have destructive obedience, which is what Hitler employed in someone using their power to cause destructive means. It's actually, I don't want to say really common, but it's common enough that it has its own term.
Does the army have obedience?
Yeah.
Is the army inherently bad?
No. Well, it depends on which side you're looking for.
Do schools use obedience?
Yeah.
Are they inherently bad?
No, I'm not arguing with you. I agree with you. But for me, I think one of the major distinctions is whether or not the people who are being obedient are really critically thinking about what they're doing. Blind obedience, I would argue, is almost always a bad thing, whether you're doing something good or bad. So if I'm a mother and I tell my kid not to run across the street, and they just listen to me just because, but then one day I'm not there to tell them to do that, they might run in the street if they're not critically thinking about why I'm telling them not to run in the street.
Right, but isn't the definition something about coercion? Like if you're not obedient, then this will happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
so is the coercion, if you run in the street, you'll get hit by a car, or is the coercion if you run in the street, I'll hit you?
The flip side is if a parent is promising punishment for not listening, or the social punishment, like you'll be shunned from the group. It's not necessarily like you'll get hit by a car. It's, especially in young kids, you see this shift a lot, where originally they don't do bad things, and when you ask them why, they say because mom says it's bad, or because dad will think I'm bad. They don't. That's their punishment there in that phase of young childhood. It's not so much there's an actual consequence for things. It's mom or dad will think I'm naughty, or mom or dad said it's bad. They're not critically thinking about why they're not doing things, so they don't realize that it's because of the car. So if you're not critically thinking about it, you may just decide one day that it doesn't matter what so-and-so thinks of you. And then you're going to do it not realizing that it's actually harmful.
Bad luck.
And I know the car crash example is a little weird because obviously if you get hit by a car, you're going to die. Well, not necessarily die, but yeah. Thoughts?
On
obedience in our conversation.
I don't know. I think it's just based on the user of obedience and who it's being used on.
Well, that's a good distinction.
I mean, that's about it.
Can you think of a situation recently where you saw obedience being a negative thing?
being a negative thing.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, the Venezuelan president told his army not to let aid into his country, and now his citizens are going hungry.
Mm-hmm.
So the soldiers are being obedient, but it's not inherently good obedience.
That's a good example.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's enough. So, thanks for talking to me about obedience, Dylan.
Bet.